We are privileged in this country to have something that the rest of the world would like to have: the best higher education system in the world, the best universities and the best colleges. Indeed, if you ever want to feel like a rock star, become a university president and then go to China or India or South America or Eastern Europe, and you will realize what a remarkable asset we have in our higher education system.
I thought I'd read from a New Yorker story from 2005, which talked about her arrival at Brown University. Now, Brown, as most of you know, is the heart of Providence. It is, arguably, the most beautiful university in the world, magnificent buildings of many centuries. I'm not a Brown person. But it was, you know, I think many people arrive there and go, this is perfect. Ruth did not think it was perfect, however. So 3 months after she had arrived at a trustees meeting, she went to the Board of Trustees, this is the New Yorker talking, with elements of a comprehensive renewal program. The plan eventually included the adoption of need-blind admissions, which I think many of us feel strongly about. The establishment also of 100 new faculty positions, an increase in faculty salaries, constructions of a major new research facility, a new biological sciences building, a new building for the medical school, creation of a series of multidisciplinary centers, renovation of undergraduate living quarters, major investment in the library, major investment in computer facilities. To fund this program would cost $1.3 billion, equal to Brown's entire endowment. After that, she warned the university would have to be in permanent fundraising mode. I'm sure that the trustees fell out of their seats when they heard this, but this is a very determined person, and all has been achieved. So with that, I'll read now from a series that briefly that Newsweek did on the great leaders in America today, and this is just a short quote about that period. When I first got to Brown, I came up with a package of ideas centered around my plan for academic enrichment. It appears to some people to be overreaching, too grandiose, impractical, but it took marshaling of lots of groups to accomplish it, and accomplish it she did. So with that, Professor and President Ruth Simmons.
I feel obligated to say that Stanford is also a very beautiful campus. John. So thank you, Dr. Room. Mr. Lateef, members of the board of the Foreign Policy Association, distinguished guests, good evening. I want to extend to all of you the warmest greetings from the Brown University faculty, staff, students, and trustees. It's a special privilege for us to be here to thank you for the work that you inspire and to acknowledge the importance of continuing to support important principles of global understanding. Now, it's very important that I say that with me tonight are friends and trustees of Brown who every day make a difference in this regard. I begin with a note of thanks to Bill Rhodes, a Brown alumnus and past trustee emeritus, past senior vice chairman of Citigroup and a member of the Foreign Policy Association board, who has been a steadfast advisor and leader in Brown's international efforts. Chancellor Tom Tisch, who is here before me, also a Brown alumnus and our chairman of the board. I'm sure he is known to you, no doubt, for his consistent efforts to advance the cause of understanding at home and abroad. In addition, I want to at least acknowledge the presence of a number of people who are of immense help to me in guiding our international efforts and just generally supporting this wonderful enterprise of education. Trustee and alumnus, Trustee Marty Granoff, retired chairman of Valdor, whose compassion and generosity of spirit transcends borders. Trustee Emeritus James Harmon, President and Chairman of the former Chairman of the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Jim, where are you? Jim, thank you so much. He is our leading supporter of African Studies at Brown. Trustee Emeritus and Alumnus Ben Lambert, Chairman of Eastdil Secured and the brilliant leader of our Strategic Growth Initiative. Trustee Emerita Robin Newstein, Senior Director of Goldman Sachs, who has been a leader in the role of the arts in international understanding. Trustee and alumnus Ralph Rosenberg, who has been extraordinary in helping us raise funds to do everything that you've heard about. Friend and Brown parent Paul Freeberg, Chairman and CEO of Continental Grain Company and founding member of Brown's China Advisory Council. Friend and Brown parent Parag Saxena, a founding member of Brown's India Advisory Council. I just want to say how grateful I am to all of them for their contributions to making Brown more international. Now, let me say that since I was a young girl, I've been entranced with how individuals of goodwill influence the way that others across the world see their countries. Growing up in the South in the 1950s under a public policy at odds with what I knew to be fair and just, I marveled at the fact that from outside our country, there were voices of comfort and reason questioning our nation's social policies. It was the actions of such people, at home and abroad, that encouraged me to imagine a time when our nation's domestic practices would change. So rather than accept limitations on where my abilities could take me, I worked to improve my mind and to learn about the mysterious world outside of my segregated neighborhood. And I also began to believe that the world would be considerably improved if concern for others was broader than our immediate neighborhood. So at the age of 17, I set off to Mexico to learn Spanish and live with a Mexican family. That was a difficult but stimulating experience, and it instilled in me a lifelong interest in continuing this wonderful journey around the world to deepen my understanding of how to affect positive human relations. I subsequently added French to my course of study and traveled to France the following year with the experiment in international living. So all these organizations that make it possible, think of that. Here's a kid from the inner city of Houston who, with no resources whatsoever, stumbles upon all of these organizations like the experiment and somehow magically is transformed outside of this environment. So I decided there could be nothing better than this, and so I decided to major in languages. And my decision to focus on languages made a good deal of intellectual sense to me, but at the same time, choosing language study was an act of defiance and a fitting response to the narrowness and insularity that segregation bred. To choose international study was to break the color line, to overturn career restrictions, and to learn without the weight of cultural stigma. Now, because of that choice, it has been my great fortune to have a career in which at every turn, involvement in world cultures and affairs has been not only possible, but central to my daily work. Universities have gone a long way in improving on their approach to internationalization, and I'm delighted. I was telling somebody at the table that when I first started my career, all of us internationalists were sort of shoved off to the side. Today, internationalization occupies the center in our universities, and I think that's a very good thing. We have very ambitious goals today in international affairs, but even with our increasingly ambitious international goals, there's still an enormous amount that we must all do to ensure that our interest in and commitment to world affairs results in the kind of global equilibrium that increases the potential for stability, peace, and prosperity. In university life, I'm proud to say, where the sharing of knowledge across borders is widely acknowledged and accepted, and where modern tools greatly facilitate shared learning, scholarship, and research, there is great hope and growing evidence that we can make a major contribution to that equilibrium through access to learning. Mindful of the time, I'm going to skip to the end of my comments. There's so much I could tell you about Brown. It really is such a wonderful place. I hope you'll allow me to say that. It is a wonderful place because our students are so involved in international life and because they believe passionately that it is their duty to be involved and to be knowledgeable about world affairs, and I'm very proud of that. I think universities will continue their important work in crossing borders, but I hope that we can also increasingly extend this work to inner cities and remote areas, to minorities and working class men and women, because after all, they too will help to elect informed leaders. They too will prepare their children to embrace or forsake global understanding. They too hold the key to advancing the cause of international understanding. The participation of all citizens in world affairs could not be more urgent than in these troubled and volatile times. So I'm especially pleased to stand with you in this endeavor, and I thank you most sincerely for the honor that you bestow on me tonight. Thank you.
Let me give you the award. Well, with this, we present the Foreign Policy Medal to President Dr. Ruth Simmons. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now,
It's very nice jewelry.
Would you like to wear it?
It's a bit heavy.
Security at the airport.
Good evening. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. John Hennessy. Since joining Stanford's faculty in 1977, John has brought a groundbreaking and pioneering approach to science and the education and training of global leaders for the 21st century. John has implemented his vision to grow Stanford and keep it at the cutting edge of solving the world's problems. John has served as Stanford's provost, dean of the School of Engineering, and chairman of the Computer Science Department. But it is in the position as Stanford's 10th president that John has expanded Stanford to make it the global institution that is revered and admired the world over. Of the many innovative programs that John has initiated at Stanford, he was instrumental in founding the Stanford China program in 2007 and ushered in a new era for international studies at Stanford with the creation of the Freeman Spogli Institute in 2005. Stanford, under John's leadership, has brought a true interdisciplinary approach to the study of pressing international issues. That approach has focused on transcending academic boundaries to deal with real-world issues. And all of this has further enhanced Stanford's reputation as a preeminent global institution and helped to foster the formation of a cooperative global economy. More recent, John has forged partnerships with Saudi Arabia in the areas of energy and computer science, emphasizing the conceptualization of a post-oil world, something the global community must acknowledge and formulate. In short, John has shaped a new kind of university, one that actively participates in the pressing issues of today across a wide range of disciplines and in a wide variety of ways. A couple of weeks ago, Forbes named John second on its list of America's best bosses, and gentleman that he is, John did not ask for a recount. In addition to his work at Stanford, John is one of the foremost authorities on computer architecture. He developed a high-performance reduced instruction set computer, RISC. I honestly have no idea what that computer does, but whenever I hear the word RISC in particular after a day like today in the market, I get a bit worried. That work led to John co-founding MIPS Technologies in 1984. He is a member of both the National Academy of Sciences, the National Academy of Engineering, and a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. John also serves on the board of directors of two fairly obscure technology companies, Google and Cisco, and he is, by any definition, the ultimate rocket scientist and someone truly deserving of this award. So please join me in welcoming and congratulating John Hennessy.
Well, thank you, Ruth. I can't help mentioning on this beautiful day as I took a walk through Central Park and down through the Ramble that New York City and Stanford share one thing in particular. Central Park and the Stanford campus were designed by the same architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, who gave us both wonderful places. We are privileged in this country to have something that the rest of the world would like to have: the best higher education system in the world, the best universities and the best colleges. Indeed, if you ever want to feel like a rock star, become a university president and then go to China or India or South America or Eastern Europe, and you will realize what a remarkable asset we have in our higher education system. Now, when you come back home, you have to remember you're no longer abroad, and I like to remind people of this with a little analogy. You see, a university president is like a caretaker at a cemetery. There are lots of people under him, but nobody's listening. It reminds us all that the great work in universities is done by the faculty and the students. And increasingly, whether that work is in research or teaching, it is implicitly and very much international in its perspective. It happens in our research, whether it's the work that Secretary Perry and Secretary Shultz are doing on trying to make nuclear weapons a thought which we no longer have to worry about, that obviously has an international dimension. It happens in the work that my colleagues are doing in the Center for Democracy and Development to try to figure out how we move from an authoritarian style of government to a democracy. Certainly a problem that we've learned is much harder than we anticipated in Iraq and Afghanistan. But it happens in our education as well, when we bring a young person from around the world to get their education at Stanford. The very first student who graduated about 8 years ago from Mongolia, a young woman who appeared on our campus. I thought she was 22. It turned out she was 30, and her 15-year-old son was with her. 15-year-old son at the age of 30. She completed a degree in international policy studies, her master's, and is now back leading the democracy movement in Mongolia. Or the students we send abroad to try to help them understand what it means to be a global citizen. And we send them around the world. We send them to Asia and Africa and South America and Europe. But I'll close with what I think is the most interesting encounter that I've ever had with a student. On the day of my inauguration, we were having a reception in the main quadrangle after the inauguration. And up walked a young man dressed in a Maasai warrior outfit and handed me a leadership staff. The leadership staff had been made by the elder of his village, and he was now giving it to me, as he said, because you are now the elder of my new village. Well, this young man continued his work at Stanford. That was in 2000. The next fall, in 2001, he was headed back to Kenya for a short visit home before the school year began, and decided to stop in New York City to visit another Kenyan student who he happened to know. He was here on 9/11. Obviously, his trip was interrupted, but after about 2 weeks, he managed to make the trip home. He went back to his villagers and told them of the great tragedy that had happened in New York City. The villagers took up a collection of the most valuable asset that the Maasai have, their cows, and donated them to the city of New York. You may have remembered that headline in the New York Times, 14 cows for the city of New York. They took a simple view. This country was giving their young man a great education, and they had to give back in this moment of tragedy. The story reached its final conclusion recently when he graduated, and we brought the elder from his village over. And the elder sat down with me, and with the help of Kameli, our student, he translated. And he said to me, "Well, I want you to know that those cows are still there, and they're all American cows, and so are all the babies." It is a reminder that in this century, no country can be an island, and the more we interact and mix with people around the world, the better we will make the world. I've had the tremendous privilege as president of the university to travel around the world and represent Stanford and represent higher education. And I have loved doing that. I've also had the great privilege of having a wonderful person supporting me there and helping me as co-ambassador, and my wife, Andrea, for more than 35 years. And it has truly been a joy to represent that. Thank you for this wonderful award, and thank you to the association.
Thank you. Want me to get the award and get a picture? Okay.